Welcome to Binge Breakthrough, the podcast designed to help you finally break through the barriers that keep you stuck, feeling out of control around food. I'm Master Certified Coach Jane Pilger, and I want you to know that no matter how long you've been struggling or what you've tried, food freedom is possible, and I'm here to show you how. After years of therapy, eating disorders treatment, restrictive diets, and reading all the books, I was still stuck in the on-again, off-again cycle of restricting and binging until I was able to see it all from a new perspective that changed everything. Each week, I will share the strategies, tools, and mindset that allowed me to overcome my decades-long battle with binge eating. Your journey to body trust starts now. Let's dive in. Hello, trusted listener. Welcome to Binge Breakthrough. I consider you a trusted listener because I trust that you are listening to this podcast in this very moment for a reason. I trust that you are going to hear something today that is going to be a new insight, new awareness. Something that you are going to hear today is going to help you see something in a new way that just may be the start of a breakthrough for you. So this week, I want to talk about a topic that I find to be very important when you are looking to change your patterns with food. And this topic can truly impact whether you are creating success for yourself or whether you are unintentionally keeping yourself in the patterns of eating that you are so desperate to get out of. And the question that we're exploring today is, how do you measure progress? If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume you have some patterns around food you would like to change. Maybe you want to stop binge eating or feeling out of control around food. And if this is your goal, it would make sense that you might want to measure progress by looking at the frequency with which you feel out of control around food. Now, on the one hand, this makes sense. But on the other hand, if your only measure of progress is whether or not you binged or felt out of control around food, you are missing so many other potential markers that could give you an indication that things are changing far more than you even realized. Have you ever had a period of time where maybe you didn't binge for several days, or maybe even several weeks or several months? You might have started to feel pretty confident in yourself, thinking your food struggles were a thing of the past. Then, out of the blue, one day you binge. And then you find yourself right back into the pattern of binging, and you feel like you have a very hard time getting out of that pit once you fall in. I hear this all the time. People often say, once I start, I just can't stop. It's like a slippery slope. Whether it's within one binge or within a cycle that can last days, weeks, or even months. So people might say, I don't know what happened. I was doing so great, and all of a sudden I binged, and it's like I lost all of my progress. I have a hard time getting out of the cycle, but I feel so good when I'm there, meaning when I'm not binging. I really thought I had it figured out this time, but obviously I really didn't. I'm so frustrated with myself. So if this sounds like you, I want you to know you are not alone. This is super common. And there are two main factors that create this experience. So the first factor is looking at the existence of a binge as a measure of failure, a clear indication that progress is not being made. And this can get exacerbated, made even worse when you make it a personal failure. So not only are you're not doing what you wanted to do, but you're thinking that you are inherently bad, wrong, or broken because of the behavior. And this is where we go back to reason number 1 in the 8 reasons why you binge that I covered in the first few episodes of this podcast. Reason number 1 is shame and judgment about the behavior. You cannot change anything from a place of shame and judgment. If you are in judgment about yourself and your behavior, you might be more likely to want to get away from the negative dialogue and self-talk, which would keep you back in the cycle of escaping with food. Now, remember, we have the analogy. When you binge, when you have these moments where you feel maybe out of control with food, it feels like you're eating compulsively, it's like the check engine light coming on the dashboard. We need to look underneath to see what's going on. When you're in shame and judgment, it's like putting a 50-pound weight on top of that hood. We can't get underneath to see what happens. Now, I want to tell you about the reality of how change works. Change takes time. Long-term, lasting change rarely happens overnight. So as you develop new patterns and new relationships with food, some of the old patterns will want to resurface sometimes. This is totally normal, and it's just how the process of change works. So when you have a binge or a period of time where you feel out of control around food, that does not mean that you are failing. It does not mean that change isn't happening. It just means you need to open up to considering all of the other ways and possibilities that you truly are changing, and that this is not a personal or a moral failing. Now, the second factor that creates the on or off the wagon experience that I described earlier is believing that once you start, you can't stop. Believing that it's easy to eat in a disconnected way and that it's hard to eat in a more connected, relaxed, more natural way. This belief will create its own reality whereby you will not be looking for any evidence to the contrary. So let me tell you an amazing thing about the brain. The brain will go to work to find evidence for whatever you are looking to be true. The brain does not care what it believes or if the evidence it is finding is helpful or not. When you believe that you are gross and disgusting, your brain will look for all of the ways that it is true, and it will find them. When you believe that once you start to eat certain foods that you can't stop, or that once you start a binge cycle, you can't get out, you have essentially given your brain permission to just keep eating. And then you say, see, told you I couldn't stop. Now, when we get to know this about the brain, this is where you get to put the power of your brain and the power of your conscious thinking to work together for you. Start looking for evidence that you truly do have control around food. Start noticing the times where food feels easy. Okay, let's go back to the original topic of this podcast. How do you measure progress? The best way to do this is to use the power of your conscious brain. So I want you to start looking for all of the ways that you are making progress. All of the ways that you are literally creating new neural pathways in your brain around food. So progress can come in so many forms. Here are a handful of examples for you. Progress might look like gaining more of an understanding of why you started binging, eating in secret, feeling out of control around food in the first place. Understanding the purpose that the binges are serving for you. What are the binges doing for you anyway? When you're in shame and judgment, you often just think, I'm just gross. This is terrible. I don't want to do this anymore. It's not, the binges aren't doing anything for me. And this isn't true. They are serving some sort of purpose. Can you understand? Can you get curious about what purpose that might be serving for you? As you develop this understanding, that is a form of progress. Here are other forms of progress. Becoming more aware while you are eating. So many people have zero awareness. During a binge, during a time where maybe you are eating in secret, you are trying to eat in hiding, so often people have zero awareness. It's like you turn the lights off on yourself. I used to say it was like me slamming the door on myself. Zero awareness of the process, of the actual experience of tasting the food, noticing the textures, noticing what you're thinking. As you become more aware, you are bringing your conscious brain into the experience. So having more awareness is a form of progress. Another form of progress is starting to have more dialogue with yourself while you are eating. So instead of, and that dialogue, the other form of progress is going to be a shift in what the dialogue sounds like. So you might currently have some dialogue with yourself that sounds like, oh, you're so gross. I can't believe you're doing this again. Might as well finish it off. We'll start again tomorrow. That may be, maybe you're just become more aware of that's what it usually sounds like in your brain. Progress is going to be a shift in what that sounds like. Maybe you start asking yourself some questions while you're eating. What do I suppose this is doing for me? What do I really need right now? Shifting that dialogue, having more of an actual interchange of a dialogue, asking yourself questions. These are all forms of progress. Here's another form of progress: changing your patterns after you eat, what you do afterwards. Our patterns of eating are not just patterns in the moment. They're also patterns of what we do after. My pattern used to be to get online and search for ways to stop binge eating. I would scroll to trying to find the bottom of Facebook. I might get on and listen to different podcasts. Anything to continue to stay disconnected from my physical experience, from my emotional experience. So a form of progress can be changing what you do afterwards. Maybe you actually sit down and journal. Maybe you get curious, what was going on for me? What was I trying to create with that experience of eating? Was I trying to create some emotions? Was I trying to get away from certain emotions? What was going on? Change your patterns afterwards. Maybe if you used to go in shame and hiding, maybe you start talking to somebody about it. Change what your pattern is. Another form of progress: not taking it personally when you do binge, not making it mean it's something about you. You can get curious, getting curious afterwards, not isolating yourself afterwards. These are also forms of progress. Experimenting, trying new things. If you find yourself, all right, here I am again, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to experiment. What would it be like to maybe eat in a different way? Maybe eat in a different place. What if I eat different foods? How can I change this experience? That is progress. Any of these things, they are bringing more awareness, more consciousness into the experience. What we want to avoid is the autopilot eating, where we're not even thinking about it. We are just doing the same thing we have always done, repeated over time, the subconscious is just running the show. It is progress when you bring more of your conscious brain and conscious thinking on board. Here's other forms of progress: the change in frequency, how often it's happening for you. Maybe it was 3 times a week and now it's once a week. Maybe it was twice a month. Now it's once a month. This is progress. The change in quantity, how much food you're eating, even what you are eating, is progress. Talking to other people about your experiences, decreasing your shame. This is progress. Increasing your understanding, increasing your emotional capacity, your capacity to be with emotions. If you start getting curious, what am I feeling right now? Could I name this emotion that I am trying to get rid of, trying to avoid by eating food? That is progress. You are bringing awareness into your experience. These are all forms of progress that you would miss if you were just deeming success or failure based upon the existence of a binge. Now, the other area where you might want to measure progress is with the scale. Now, you can listen to episode 19 of this podcast for my thoughts about the scale as a measure of progress and how to decide for yourself if it's a helpful tool for you. But to me, the ultimate progress is shifting how you see yourself as an eater. It's a new relationship with yourself and with food. So evaluate yourself in that area. Look at the relationship. I want you to think right now about your strongest or closest relationship. How was that relationship developed? Did it take time? Does it still take effort and attention? Is it perfect all the time? When it's not, do you blow up or take it personally? Or does it work better if you get curious about it and work to figure out what happened or where communication lines got crossed or expectations were missed? We can do the same thing with our relationship with food. Rather than just trying to stop feeling out of control around food, what if you were simply trying to develop a trusting, relaxed, connected, and supportive relationship with food and with your body? This will give you so many more avenues to explore. It also offers a new perspective as a relationship to build and improve, rather than something that is broken and needs to be fixed. Remember our earlier example, that thinking was, I thought I was fixed, but obviously I wasn't. This thinking is still coming from the lens of thinking you are broken. There is nothing to fix here. There is nothing broken. It's a new perspective, a new relationship. What if on the way to completely unwinding your binge eating patterns, you just have a period of time where binging or eating compulsively is just something that you do sometimes? It doesn't have to be a moral failing on your part. And it will absolutely become something you don't ever do anymore. But on the way from here to there is going to be a middle ground. When you just look at the existence of a binge as a failure, you aren't allowing for any middle ground. You are expecting yourself to change completely, and that just isn't the way that it works for some people. I think about myself, and when I quit smoking, I used to smoke quite a bit back in the day. Then I cut back to where I only smoked when I drank. I had a pretty strong association of smoking in conjunction with alcohol consumption. And it took a while for that neural pathway to die down. But it did. And now I would never smoke another cigarette again. Now, I can't say that I'm there with food and that I don't ever eat in ways that feel a little bit compulsive. But those times for me now, they're so far and few between. And when it does happen, I know it's just a light on my dashboard. I look under the hood to see what's going on. I address it, I take care of my needs, and I move on. It isn't an issue because I don't make it an issue. I do believe there will be a day in the future where I don't ever do it again. But I'm not there yet, and that's okay. It doesn't prevent me from living an amazing life and helping other people live amazing lives where food isn't the primary source of focus. What fires together, wires together. It is true that when we repeatedly eat in certain ways, we are creating neural pathways for that behavior that will want to be repeated until we create new neural pathways. But while we are in that process, we don't have to be perfect about it in order for change to be happening underneath the surface. What would be different if you believed that even in the midst of a binge, that you were actually still changing the neural pathways and that you were in the process of creating a new relationship with food and new patterns of behavior around it? What would be different if you started looking for all the ways that you are making progress, even if you choose to eat in a way that isn't what you want for yourself long term? What would be different if you saw yourself as a person who just eats a lot of food sometimes, but didn't make it mean anything terrible about who you are as a person or how lovable or acceptable you are? What would be different if you believed that listening to this podcast is the start of how you will shift the way you see progress and put your brain to work to find all of the evidence of the progress you have already been making that you haven't allowed yourself to see before? Your progress is there. It's waiting to be discovered. Put your brain to work on finding the evidence. If you are used to finding all of the ways that you are failing or not changing, this might feel challenging. And if that's the case, it's not challenging because the evidence of progress isn't there. It's challenging because your brain isn't used to looking for it. Challenge your brain to work in this new way. Don't allow no or I don't know for an answer. It will find the evidence that you are making progress if you get curious about it. So, how is it true that you really are making more progress than you realized? I'd love to hear about it. That's what I have for you today. I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Binge Breakthrough. If you would like personalized guidance, insight, and support to implement the tools, skills, and concepts you are learning on this podcast, I have just what you need. Cultivate an entirely new relationship with yourself and with food, alongside other women who know and understand your struggles. Coaching, connection, and change are waiting for you. Spots are limited, so sign up today. Find out more at janepilger.com/cultivate.